Good day, everyone. This is Professor Theo. We have arrived at the last week of our class. This is a video over both forms number 5 and number 6. My apologies for the delay on the video on form number 5. I was out of town and, I was on vacation. I needed a few days off. So now I am getting this back and running. I'm grading your papers, so you will expect to start to see grades tomorrow, and definitely all the grades, the plan by Wednesday. And so I hope all is well with you. Finish up strong. So form number 5, I won't spend a whole lot of time on because the question was basically asking you for your definitions of those forms of social capital. So we talked about that bonding capital, we talked about bridging capital, and then we talked about that linking capital. And so just want to give you some insights of how important social capital is, especially in terms of just intercultural communication, but just bridging relationships in general. When we think about capital, we normally think about finances. You know, when someone has a capital campaign, they're raising money, building a building, and they have to raise capital. When you start your business, they ask you what type of capital you have. Well, one of the downsides, if we just look at capital from a financial standpoint, is that some of us may not have the type of capital that we may need to get some things done if it was strictly from a financial standpoint. But relationship wise, there's some human resources that we may have at our disposal that we may not know because we haven't taken the time to reach out to those individuals. So when we grow in our intercultural communication, when we open ourselves up to uh, the possibility and the experience of interacting with other people, we recognize that within our own circle, maybe even within our own family, within our own jobs, our own institutions, that there's a wealth and a richness of resources that we have. But sometimes we haven't taken the opportunity to interact with others who aren't exactly like us, so we miss out on some of that richness. Or we assume that they may not have the goods, they may not have the intelligence or the wherewithal to accomplish what we need to have accomplished because of our own preconceived notions, stereotypes, and things of that nature. But as we interact, it's almost like a gold mine. You interact with individuals and you recognize just how much they can add to your life in so many different capacities. And so first we have that bonding capital, which is people within your own community. It can be people within your own family, your own church family, your own um, job. So some of your coworkers. It could be some of your classmates, people within your own neighborhood, and maybe you just haven't taken the opportunity to sit down and talk with them. I think one of the beauties of the past assignments you just did with the intercultural interview, one of the reoccurring themes was that you had this person that you kind of knew, but you never really talked like that on that level. And now you're so appreciative of learning so much more about this person. The stories that you didn't know about, and you would just see the person as they are now, or you would see the person as a distance, at a distance, or you would just see some of their behaviors, some of the things that they do, but now you had the beauty and the opportunity to see the story behind that, to get some background information, to learn more about those individuals' lives. And now you're saying, wow, I wish I'd known this earlier. And you're looking forward to building with these individuals more in the future. And I think that's a great thing. There are there's a wealth of resources right at our disposal, right in our own circle. And sometimes we just haven't taken the time to discover the hidden talents, the inner strength that someone may have, the inner beauty that someone may have because we just judge from the outside. But when we get to know individuals, even in our circle, we'll realize just how much social capital we do have, that we can get things accomplished, oftentimes even in house, so to speak, just by pulling on the different resources that we have. And I think that's the beauty of expanding our thoughts and expanding our willingness to bond with others. That's why you got that bonding capital. It talks about how we're close with these individuals in proximity. We're close with them because we work at the same place, we live in the same neighborhood, but we're not close in terms of we haven't bonded yet. We haven't come together. And oftentimes you may have a particular group who is unsuccessful in getting things accomplished because within that group they have not taken the time to come together. And I think about times when people have gotten things done, it's because those individuals have come together, they have bonded. That's why teams have preseason and bonding activities, and employers now are spending more money on team building activities outside of the workplace because they recognize that if all these different individuals who have different giftings and different talents but work for the same company, if we can get them to bond, how much more can we get accomplished? And then we have that bridging capital. Here you have some individuals who are also on your level, but just not necessarily in your neighborhood. This is a different neighborhood. It could be a different team. It could be a different church. So, two churches collaborating, a whole bunch of churches collaborating, but these are churches who have similar uh, makeups, similar in size, similar as far as um, the financial resources they have at their disposal, similar in their belief systems. Yet one is in this neighborhood and one is way over that neighborhood. How much more can get accomplished when those two churches come together and collaborate? Um, this department and that department over there collaborating. This group over here with this group over there collaborating. This neighborhood with this neighborhood over there collaborating. And you're literally building a bridge between one entity to another entity. Whereas because of our hangups and our preconceived notions and our stereotypes and sometimes even our prejudices, our biases, we may not want to bridge with a group that we think is different than us. That's them over there, and it becomes us and them. And or maybe we only do it in certain capacities. So a church only interacting with a certain neighborhood if there's outreach. And we're up here and we're giving back to this one community. And we do this once a year, but there's no other interaction throughout the year. And then it shows that mindset that we haven't bridged that gap fully. It just is once in a while type thing. But when you bridge, when you're building those bridges, now you have this mutual benefit going back and forth where both parties have equal access to the other parties. And I think that's very important when you think about capital. And then finally, you have that linking capital. So if you think about the website LinkedIn, it's not individuals on the same level trying to connect with people who are on their level. It's individuals who are on one level trying to connect with people who are on a higher level. They're trying to get hired. They're trying to put themselves on the radars of those who have more resources. So it's about upward mobility. So every now and then you may need someone from a different community who has some things that you don't have. I think about my life and I always tell people I am a product of individuals who invested in me. So they had more than I had. They had more experience, more wealth, more knowledge, and they invested in me. And one of the returns on that investment is that I would do the same thing. So I may have a student or a younger believer or a member of my church or a mentee, someone who sees me on a different level than them, and now they are may come to me for a reference, a recommendation, some advice, a job, whatever it may be. And I think all that's about that linking capital, that we all need to tap into the resources of those who are like us in our own community, that bonding capital. But every now and then there's going to be some deficits. We need to reach across the bridge, that bridging capital. And then sometimes we're going to find ourselves in a position where in order to gain access to a particular place or in order to get to another level, We need to link up, not link down, but link up with someone who may have a little bit greater capacity than we do at the particular moment. Hopefully, to bring us up there, and then we can do the same. That's just some few of my thoughts on that social capital. But social capital is very important. Whenever you're trying to get something done, don't just think about, well, can we afford it or not financially. Think about who in your circle that you can make some phone calls to get some things done. Whether it's, hey, we're trying to move, we can't afford to pay some movers, but we happen to know some people we can call. Or we're trying to get this after school program, or our church wants to do something. Who do we have in our immediate circle? Who do we have in a surrounding neighborhood? And who do we have that we know has a little clout, a little more resources than we do that we could tap into? All right, so let's transition now to form number 6, which was a really good question in terms of how does the media influence our perception on other cultural groups? Um, I'm going to start with some of your thoughts and then I'll conclude with some of my own thoughts. But someone said, I don't think that the mass media wants to dominate uh, or homogenize a particular culture. They prefer to market products to niche cultural groups. This is interesting response in terms of from a marketing strategy, how effective is just mass production? Um, Trying to put out a message or product from a media standpoint that appeals to as many people as possible. That's one way of doing it. We can talk about that shotgun spreader approach. But then they talk about like a sniper approach when you hone in on a particular group. And so you're starting to even see this with some of the well-established franchises. I think about McDonald's and how you got these general McDonald's commercials that are kind of appealing to everyone. But then you also have these culturally diverse McDonald's commercials that I don't necessarily see as on mistake, but they're very purposed. Uh, you know, it may take place in a neighborhood, and the cast now is predominantly African American or Hispanic and Latino. And even you've seen McDonald's. I don't know if you've noticed this. I don't go to McDonald's and I don't eat fast food. But back in the days, you have a lot of these restaurants who would even contextualize their menu depending upon the region that they were in the United States. They would sell certain the normal stuff that you get at every fast food, but they would also sell specialized, contextualized dishes that were more ethnic, depending upon the area. And so I agree in terms of sometimes that is an effective strategy where you do see the media honing in on particular ethnic groups, cultural groups. Someone said the media is not doing the world any favors. In fact, I believe that they're making things worse. Often they're reporting pins one race against another cultural group, widening the divide between them. I agree wholeheartedly. You know, I always tell people that it doesn't take a relationship to establish a stereotype, but it does take one to destroy a stereotype. And often these stereotypes that we have about these other cultural groups aren't based upon our own experiences. They aren't based upon what we have seen firsthand. It's often based upon the stories, the narratives out there that we often see, whether it's in the media in terms of news, whether it's popular television, whether it's the movies, and they paint a particular picture of a particular race, a particular ethnicity, a particular country, and all of a sudden, without ever having some meaningful interaction with those groups, we think that that represents accurately those groups. And then when we meet individuals from those groups, all of a sudden now, either they're going to affirm what we believed or they're going to disavow what we believe. And oftentimes, if they disavow what we believe, the first thing we say is, well, if I've been taught this whole thing for so long, then you develop this tenacity, which is you hear something's true over and over, so you begin to think it's true. When you discover that it may not be true, our first tendency is to say that that new discovery may be the anomaly. That if I heard that all immigrants are thugs and violent and illegal, and you meet one who's not those things, you may think that they're the anomaly, that they're the exception of the rule. until you may meet others and others and others, then you begin to say, okay, maybe there's something more to this thing. And so the media definitely, in a lot of ways, has perpetuated. And I don't think it's just the media and as an isolated entity, because the viewership drives that, the ratings drive that. So it's not just the media is doing this, and we are so resistant. Like, the media is feeding me this stuff, but I resist it. No, those media outlets have a populace of individuals who enjoy those types of news stories. They're catering to a particular population. So it's not just life imitating art, but art also imitating life. And so the media is influencing the culture, but the culture is also influencing the media. Somewhere along the line, those in the media discovered that this would sell. And it's because there's a large segment of the population that eats that stuff up. And so, yes, I think it's both and the media as well as the culture affecting the culture, but also the culture impacting the media. Someone says, I think the media vastly influences how we perceive certain people, culture groups. There's a lot of media coverage on immigration right now. The media, in some ways, is showing the people at the border as criminals and less humane, and a lot of people are buying into it. So I mentioned that earlier. Someone said the media has so many different influences on our perception of cultural groups, especially the mean world syndrome. It seems like no people of color are ever really portrayed as working class citizens. It's always images of them being impoverished and uneducated. So the very minute an encounter happens, fear is automatically the first feeling that people feel. Awesome. Not awesome that it's like that, but that's an awesome response. That, like I said, if you don't have the real world interaction with anyone, or if you have limited interaction with a particular group, it doesn't take much to convince you about some of the characteristics of that group, especially from a negative standpoint. We, from a psychological standpoint, we tend to focus on the negative. So that mean world syndrome, it'll have you thinking the whole world is falling apart. And earlier we talked about the principle of negativity, how we just dwell upon the negative things, and we gloss over the positive. So you may see a feel-good story on the news every now and then, a feel-good post on Facebook, but a lot of stuff is always these violent videos or something negative, because that stuff sells, unfortunately. And if you don't have the real world interaction, you think that that's accurate, an accurate portrayal of those groups. And then when you do have that interaction, now you're on pins and needles, because what if what I've heard is true? And so now you're fearful until you until we take the opportunity to really get to know those individuals from those particular cultures. And sometimes we realize that we have more in common than that we don't have in common. Someone says media is selective about what they cover and what they will not cover. This is true. It used to be that the news would reporting would be, here's what happened, we report on what happens. But think about it from the standpoint of this. If you have a kidnapping or a missing person thing on the news, and it's normally like and it becomes like a popular thing. The one that always comes to my mind back in the days was Natalee Holloway, a young lady who went missing on spring break, I believe. The thing is, young people, or people in general, especially young people, go missing all the time. Who determines which one gets the coverage and which one doesn't? Especially when you're not dealing with celebrities. When you're dealing with celebrity, of course, if a celebrity dies, it's going to probably get more coverage than the average person. But we're talking about average people who die, or average people who get kidnapped, or average people who go missing, or average people who lose their home. Whatever tragedy it may be, who decides who gets the coverage and who don't get the coverage? Because when we see that one story, we be like, man, this person has it bad, but there's normally hundreds, if not thousands, of individuals going through the exact same thing. But who decides what gets the coverage? It lets you know that everything we see isn't everything that could be seen. And just because we don't see it doesn't mean it is not capable of being seen. There is a selection process, and it's normally based upon a lot of factors, and one of it being ratings. And so that's unfortunate because then you may have, and it's the same thing. I feel the same way in regards to something like GoFundMe. What makes one person who loses their job because they don't have a car, someone does a GoFundMe and they raise $1 million and they buy the car, and I'm not sure what happens with the rest. Well, you may have other stories like that, and they got a GoFundMe and it doesn't blow up. Um, but it's the coverage, and not necessarily now the media coverage in terms of news, but the social media coverage. What makes something blow up in a positive sense while something else stays undercover? Media can be both positive and negative, and it can have positive and negative effects. Yes, medium is just a tool. Media is a medium um, to do what the beholder wants that thing to do. So there's lots of agendas that can be pushed. There's things that can come out of that good positively. It often depends on who's using it and why it's being used. So when we blame the media, what we're really blaming are the individuals who control the media. Because this thing called the media, social media in and of itself, isn't bad. The meat, television, all those things are just tools. They're vehicles. It's the people driving and the people wielding those tools. A hammer is a hammer, but then it could also be used to destroy, depending upon, or it could be used to build, depending upon who's using that hammer. Same thing with the media, which is why we should all be, anytime you're taking media ethics courses and things of that nature, we talk about just being responsible users and consumers of media. Someone says, when we soak up what the media wants us to believe, we are less likely to create a true social interaction with the people in everyday life. So basically, if you've always heard certain things about a certain person, by the time you interact with that person, your interaction is going to be shaped and influenced by the things you've heard. So that's we think about intentional orientation. There's this thing in communication called intentional orientation, and it simply says how a thing is spoken about influences how we view that thing, how we interact with that thing. So there could be a person that you haven't met yet, but you hear a lot of good things about that person. So now you build up this expectation of their goodness. And so when you interact with that person, when they are doing good or even average, it just seems like it's the best thing ever. And when that person does something wrong, based upon what you've heard, you're kind of like, well, maybe they're having a bad day. You give them the benefit of the doubt. There has to be a logical explanation because all I've heard is good things. Well, if all you've heard is negative things, even when the person's doing well, you're looking for the negative. You're trying to find when they're messing up. Or when they're doing well, you're like, what's their angle? They're putting on a show because all I heard was negative things. And so the media can sometimes shape interaction even before the interaction takes place. And it's important that when we have that interaction that now we're able to discern for ourselves, which is that extensional orientation. This is when we say, you know what, regardless of what I've heard, I'm going to investigate and interact on my own, and then I'll make my own judgments. I think that's very important, just in relationships in general. I think the media is very intentional and specific in targeting groups of people. Um, this is basically to mold and control society. Yeah, I mean, gone are the days where you just arbitrarily say, here's what needs to be covered. Now it's strategic. And that's why you have whole channels who have a certain bent. And it's almost like you have to watch 8 different channels to get a well-rounded view of a particular subject because certain networks have a certain bent. And even with stuff that's not as important, I think about sports. Some of my favorite sports shows, and you may have some of the commentators on a show like First Things First or First Take or Undisputed, and each person has their own niche. And you can almost guess their taglines. You can almost guess how they're going to fall on a certain subject in terms of a certain athlete. And after a while, you'd be like, well, this almost seems scripted. It's just unreasonable how this person can always see this person this negative way, no matter what good they do, And you start to ask, do they really feel like this, or is this part of the show? And unfortunately, I mean, you think about reality TV, there's nothing real on TV nowadays. And so some of this stuff is scripted, it's strategic, it's a part of the show, it has agenda, it's all for a particular game. And so these are just some of the thoughts I want to share. And just my thoughts, I agree with a lot of what was said here. The media is very influential in shaping our views. And I think that's why it's important that we be mindful of that. So when someone says, yeah, I can watch this and I can watch that and it doesn't impact me, it doesn't influence me, of course it does. Even when you're watching things for leisure and things for pleasure, you're still being bombarded with these messages. So as long as you can recognize that, I think it's okay. So I'm not saying don't watch this, don't follow that, but let's not be naive to think that that even entertainment is strictly for entertainment. Even the entertainment has an agenda to influence us to feel a certain way, think about certain things a certain way, to become desensitized, to become motivated, to become compelled. Sometimes it can be unifying, sometimes it can be divisive, but rarely is it strictly just for entertainment. There's always something behind it. And so we should just be mindful in how we produce media, how we consume media. Um, yes. So this has been Professor Williams with a brief video on Form 5 and a more involved video on Form 6. Like I said, you can expect to start seeing grades in your papers tomorrow and Wednesday. I'll finish up strong. Take care and God bless.